Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. When my wife and I bought our first house, we were thrilled. It was in a nice neighborhood with a homeowners association, which we didn't think much about at the time. We just wanted our little slice of the American dream. Boy, were we naive. It started small. Nitpicky notices about our grass being half an inch too long or our trash cans being visible from the street on non-pickup days. We'd get a snotty email from the Homeowners Association board secretary informing us of our latest violation. For the sake of neighborly peace, we followed their rules, even though they seemed excessive. But the Homeowners Association board's demands kept escalating. They dictated what color we could paint our front door, when we could put up holiday decorations, and that we couldn't park a third car in our own driveway. One day I came home to a $200 fine taped to my door for our lawn looking shabby. That was the last straw. I marched over to the Homeowners Association president's house, notice in hand, ready to have it out. A thin, pinched-faced woman answered the door. Before I could get a word out, she sighed and said, "Let me guess, another unfair fine from the Homeowners Association board?" I was stunned. Here I was ready to chew out the dragon lady herself, only to have her commiserate with me. We got to talking, and I learned our Homeowners Association president, Barbara, was just as fed up as I was. She never wanted to be on the board but got stuck with the job when no one else volunteered. The real tyrants were the board secretary, Helen, who sent all the notices, and her husband, Frank, the board treasurer. Together, those two made everyone's lives miserable. Barbara and I hatched a plan to take back our neighborhood from the petty dictators. She had access to the Homeowners Association board member list. We would rally allies to our cause and vote Helen and Frank out at the next election. In the meantime, we would start subtly disregarding their absurd rules, mow our lawns when we pleased, hang Christmas lights early, leave trash cans curbside an extra day. Small acts of defiance to undermine their power. As expected, the outraged emails poured in from Helen, but Barbara, bless her, always responded that she would look into it, and left it at that. Helen and Frank were fuming. The closer we got to the election, the more unhinged their demands became. They increased fines, called for liens against violators' homes, and even tried to ban pets over 25 pounds. This only strengthened our resolve. The night before the election, we gathered at Barbara's with about 24 fellow fed-up homeowners. We knew Helen and Frank wouldn't go down without a fight, so we had to be strategic. Our neighborhood used an Homeowners Association management website to distribute notices, hold elections, and collect dues. Helen had domain admin privileges. Our tech-savvy supporters figured out her weak password and acquired access the night before the election. We sent out a notice that the polling place had been changed to Barbara's house so we could monitor turnout. Come election day, the defeated look on Helen's pinched face when only 5 people showed up to the official polling place was priceless. At Barbara's house, we had a potluck picnic to celebrate our victorious coup over the nonsense. I'll never forget the euphoria I felt as our new board repealed all of Helen and Frank's petty rules that very same day. It was a lesson to me to never underestimate the power of a small but organized group to overturn overreaching tyrants. And if they use sneaky digital means to rig their authority, well, 2 can play at that game. Our neighborhood is so much happier now. Kids play in their front yards, Christmas lights stay up extra days, and no more stressful notices about grass length in our mailboxes. As for Helen and Frank, let's just say they're very eager to sell and move away. And our new Homeowners Association president, Barbara, she was absolutely born to lead our little community with her friendly smile, common sense, and steadfast belief in freedom. Every time I walk past her house and see the third car parked in her driveway, it just fills my heart with satisfaction at a revolution accomplished. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I, a woman in my 30s, have been a people pleaser to a fault my whole life. I've been working in marketing for over 10 years. Over the years, I've had my fair share of bosses who were good, average, and some who were subpar. There is one in particular that stood out as exceptionally awful. This story is from about 5 years ago. Pamela, a woman in her 40s, not her real name, was the vice president of marketing and sales for a mid-size retailer. She joined the company a few years after I did. According to rumors, she was the 4th choice for the position and was hired to appease shareholders. As a manager under her, My job entailed ensuring the website and stores had their products merchandised properly, receiving all their monthly sales materials, managing advertising, setting up and managing the department's budget, project managing all department projects and operations, creating reports to reflect sales, managing presentations and creative briefs for future projects, and more. In essence, I did her work and all the administrative tasks to keep the department running. I managed all this because I had access to her email and often sent emails on her behalf. Pamela spent most of her time arriving after 10 a.m., taking extended business lunches, and planning company parties, which I also had to organize. I consistently questioned why she spent so much of our budget on these events when we lacked the financial resources. Pamela instructed me to borrow from future months' budgets to cover the current month's overspending. Therefore, at the start of every month, I had an original budget, and by the end of the month, I had to submit an edited budget, revised under Pamela's direction, that made it appear as if Pamela's spending was under control. Admittedly, I made mistakes occasionally, being in charge of so many tasks, and often found myself working 12-hour days, split between office hours and work after my child went to bed. Weekend work was also done before my family woke up and after they went to bed. During Pamela's first major holiday season, sales were poor. Pamela kept changing her mind about the store visuals, brought in new advertising and PR agencies, comprising her personal friends, and ignored our buying and merchandise team's planned promotions in favor of her own. At this time, I was dealing with an infection that escalated to sepsis, leading to hospitalization. The doctors and my husband attributed it to work-related stress and advised me to take a break. As I recovered, I realized the extent of the harm I was causing to myself, my family, and the company. However, old habits prevailed, and I checked both mine and my boss's emails. What I discovered infuriated me. First, I received a bouquet of flowers from upper management wishing me well, presumably organized by Pamela. They were her favorite flowers. When I checked her inbox to organize the receipt for accounting upon my return, I found emails from the past 3 days unrelated to business. Pamela had been emailing her friends, complaining about my inability to shake off sepsis and get back to work, lamenting her lack of access to my notes, spreadsheets, or documents, which were clearly labeled on our shared drive, and seeking advice from a former colleague on how to boost sales and save her job. In a lengthy email thread, this old colleague suggested that my purported mismanagement was to blame for the issues, and Pamela could use this as grounds to fire me, especially since I was in the hospital. The colleague advised against outright dismissal due to potential retaliation claims, but suggested framing me for stealing or misusing company resources. Upon my return, Pamela called me into her office, expressing concern that I was taking on too much, and decided to relieve me of managing the department's budget. She instructed me to submit a small stack of invoices to accounting and prohibited me from discussing any budget or departmental concerns with anyone but her. Foreseeing her intentions, I collected evidence against her. I gathered the stack of invoices from Pamela's desk, added the incriminating email threads I had read in the hospital, the current unedited budget, and hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's instructions on altering numbers. I also included an email where Pamela subtly threatened to replace me if I failed to comply with her demands. When delivering the invoices to accounting, I encountered Lois, our main accountant, whom I had a good rapport with. I cryptically informed her that Pamela was the only person she should discuss our department's budget and invoices with. Lois understood the implication upon seeing the thick file folder and discreetly accepted it. Within a week, Pamela was terminated. She has been job hopping for the past few years. The CEO and HR apologized to me for the ordeal and offered me a paid 1-week vacation. Despite this, I left the company after another year. Today, I am a manager for sales and marketing with an excellent boss, Mike, a man in his 40s. We are in the process of hiring a team for me to manage and direct. Recently, while reviewing job applications, I found Pamela's resume. Upon closer inspection, it was indeed her. She had exaggerated her accomplishments, claiming my work as her own, and falsely stating she generated an 87% sales growth during the holiday season at our previous company. As a habitual people-pleaser who believes in giving chances, it was exceptionally satisfying to mark her application as disqualified. The next one is a petty revenge story. This is not my story, it belongs to a friend of mine. I couldn't stop laughing at the subtlety and nuance of her win this week, and I have to relate it. A is an executive assistant for the CEO. While she works mostly for one person, there's an executive team that she also does some work for, and one of these is Acai. C, for want of a better word, is the epitome of the office Karen. She takes great joy in being condescending, rude, taking credit for everyone else's work, and throwing people under the bus. Difficult to work with is a bit of an understatement. When A first started working there, C reported her to her boss for attitude on a number of occasions, when all A was doing was trying to hide her frustration because C was deliberately being obtuse and making A's life unnecessarily difficult. A's boss is well aware of the friction. However, C is actually very good at her job, and she's clever enough to not cross lines that will get her in deep trouble. A decided if she couldn't beat them, she'd join them in the best and most subtle possible way. Earlier this week, A ensured her boss overheard her talking to a client, praising C to the heavens. It was actually a real client call, not faked. When she hung up, her boss praised her for being the bigger person and talking up C despite their relationship. When C came in, the boss made a special mention to her that A had been praising her while A just sat there smiling innocently at her. C was not happy about this, but couldn't do or say a thing without looking like an ass. To put the cherry on top, the following morning, A greeted her with, "C, you look so tired. Are you okay? Can I make you a coffee?" C said no and stomped into her office. Every time she came out, A proceeded to say, "You really don't look well. Are you sure you're okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" Meanwhile, A's boss overheard all of these exchanges and once again praised her for setting aside their differences and trying to make things work. By the end of the day, C was visibly seething, and A was the boss's new favorite. We believe C may well be a basket case by Christmas. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Wasn't sure where to post this. First-time poster, long-time lurker. A little background. My father never properly learned to read and write. He came from a dysfunctional home, but that's another story. He was, however, very good at fixing cars. He worked at a junkyard since before I was born. I'll call this Junkyard A. A lot of times he would offer advice or even fix the cars of the customers on his own time as a side hustle. Another thing about my dad is he knew everybody. Anywhere we went, people would always stop him and speak to him, mostly asking about a problem they are having with their cars. It didn't matter where we went, even on vacation across the country, he ran into people he knew. The junkyard he worked at was originally owned by two brothers. They were good bosses and he made a decent wage and had very good health insurance. They made good business there, and my father was the senior sales specialist. Business was so good they bought a new location and built a new building and moved there. A few years later, the business was sold to a guy named Dave. Dave was all right, although we lost the health insurance. He stayed there for, I'd say, 8 or 9 more years. One day out of the blue, Dave fires my dad and said it was because he didn't have enough technical skills. He couldn't hardly read or write, but he could use the computer one-handed to search the system for parts while on the phone with a customer. He and 2 or 3 other guys would be in the front to help customers, and my dad's line would have 2 or 3 people waiting, especially for him, and would refuse to be waited on by someone else. So he came home and filed for unemployment. He stayed home for maybe 3 weeks and was offered a job at another junkyard that was located between the city we lived and the next city over. Now comes the malicious compliance. Since my father was so well liked and everyone knew he got a raw deal from Junkyard A, they also switched businesses. All his longtime customers and friends now frequented Junkyard B. Many used car dealerships had deals with my father for the junk cars they sold for parts or parts they needed for fixing their used cars. All these businesses also switched junkyards and followed my dad to Junkyard B. This was a devastating hit to Junkyard A's business. So bad, in fact, they ended up selling the business to the owners of Junkyard B. As soon as the sale was finished, my dad was sent back to Junkyard A where he worked for the rest of his life. He actually died in the junkyard. Massive heart attack. The funeral was so full of people there was not enough room for everyone in the funeral home. His funeral procession, the line of cars that drive uninterrupted from the funeral home to the cemetery, was over an hour long due to so many cars. My mom went to buy the plot next to his a few days after the funeral, and the lady working there said she had been working there for over 40 years, and it was one of the largest groups gathered for a funeral she had ever seen. He may not have been able to read or write very well, but he knew cars and he knew people, a lot of people. The next one is an entitled People Story. So a few weeks ago, I posted about the ex-sister-in-law and her kids coming over, and the kids behaved badly and broke my candy tree, etc., while sister-in-law Barb was smiling at her kids' bad behavior. She doesn't believe in saying no to her kids because there are too many no's out there. So anyway, after I made her pay for the damage her son Nick did, they left, and we went to my cousin's house where we had plans for Christmas. Within a few hours of that, she started calling and texting me non-stop. I didn't take the calls because I figured she was mad that she had to pay $300 to me. Sunday night, I got a call from Barb's mom. She made small talk and almost immediately asked me if we could help her out by watching the kids for 4 days because Barb wanted to whisk her new boyfriend away on a cruise for Easter. I told her that we can't do that. She just wouldn't listen and kept trying to make me agree. I told her that my husband has stage 4 cancer and he will be getting chemotherapy. And during Easter break, we have plans to go somewhere as well. Besides, we just don't want to be responsible for the kids who don't listen to anyone. Apparently, she wants her daughter, Barb, to settle down again, so it would be a big favor. And since I had blocked her on all social media and cell and home numbers after she started bombarding us with calls because Barb's hotel room was messed up, and she and the kids had nowhere to go and had to drive over an hour to get to a relative's house. If I had answered the phone, I could have let them in my house while we went to my cousin's. I had to cut in and tell her very firmly that I would never do that, and that her daughter and her kids are not welcome in our house ever again. In spite of me saying no, Jane, Barb's mom, 85, kept trying to convince me to help out. I told her, "Miss Jane, I am going to hang up now and will not discuss this any further because we have a life too, and she and her family can help Barb but not us." And I hung up. She called again yesterday and asked if I had given what she asked a thought, and I said my answer is still the same, and that is a big fat no. The next one is an entitled Parent Story. My mom and dad divorced when I was 9. Soon after, my mom married my stepfather. Summers and every other Christmas were spent out of state with my dad. The rest of the time, I was with my mom. They did not have the nicest of splits in the divorce, but both insisted and kept to it that they would not interfere with my younger brother and me, relationship with the other parent. My stepfather did not agree to this, however, and did everything he could to sabotage our relationship with our father. My dad would call, and if my stepfather answered the phone, he would hang up on Dad. He called my dad to demand more child support, or he would legally adopt us, and my dad would never see us again. I had no real friends growing up because I did not want to bring people home. One day, while visiting my dad, we ordered some custom leather jackets to arrive about a month later. It came, and I found the box on the dining room table with "Return to Sender" written on it, as if he had meant to send it back later. I grabbed it, stashed it in my room, and thankfully, he forgot all about it. That night after dinner, as everyone was on the couch watching the evening news, I brought the package out, gave it to Mom, and asked her to explain why it was being sent back. My stepdad began to say that we couldn't afford it, to which I said everything had already been paid for, and why did he hang up on Dad when Dad called? And I said Dad had recordings of the threats to adopt us and prevent Dad from ever seeing us again. My stepfather began spinning a tale about how he just wanted us all to be one big family, and he knew how my mom didn't like my dad, and he did everything for the sake of the family. Then he caught me smiling, stopped, and asked me, "What the heck is so funny?" I said, "Dad has no recordings, but why does he need them when you just admitted to everything?" He said something unintelligible and jumped off the couch to lunge at me until my mom stopped him by getting in between us. Mom simply said, "Out!" and he walked to the front door and let himself out. After we heard him drive away, Mom asked for the details about everything and apologized for bringing him into our lives. The next morning, I was walking to the bus for school when my stepfather quickly pulled up near me and stopped, then got out of the car and started walking towards me. I screamed like I've never screamed before or since. He got up to me, slapped me across the face, grabbed my shirt, and started walking me to his car. I didn't go peacefully, though, screaming and resisting the whole way. That's when my savior appeared. An older gentleman had seen everything and came out of his house with quite possibly the largest hand cannon I have ever seen outside of the movies. He just saw an older man dragging a screaming teen girl to his car. He told my stepdad to stop, pointed his gun at him, and got him to kneel down with his ankles crossed and to intertwine his fingers behind his head, so I believe he was former military. Isn't that how you are taught to take prisoners? I don't know for sure. His wife had also seen everything and called the police, then came out and began soothing me. When the police arrived, 2 cars, 4 officers in total, my savior put his gun down and raised his hands to show the police he meant no harm to them, that he was not a threat. His wife said that she was the one who called and said that she and her husband had seen a man pull up, grab a young girl, and begin dragging her to his car when they decided to interfere for my safety. I then confirmed the story but did not mention he was my stepfather. The police asked for IDs and noted that my student ID, all I had at the time, had a different last name and had no sign of the name my stepfather was calling me. At the time, I went by my middle name, but my student ID had my actual first name, and I had kept my original last name, so it was different than his, despite his attempt to claim he was my father and was just disciplining me for something. He was handcuffed and taken away in one of the cars, while the other car drove me to school. I had missed the bus by this time, where the officer went in and told the attendance office lady that I had been the victim of an attempted kidnapping, and that's why I was late. He later showed up after school to give me a ride home and stayed in the house with me until my mom got off work and came home. My brother, who was unaware of my day's adventures, came home, and my brother, the officer, and I played video games until my mom got home. My mom and stepfather later divorced. When I was at school a couple of days later, my stepfather came by the house with a police escort and my mom's supervision and got his personal stuff. My mom was later able to get a restraining order against him for herself, me, and my brother. Haven't heard from my former stepfather since. My brother still lives with his family in our hometown and saw that my savior had just passed away and decided to tell me, and he told me to put my story here. I have never posted here before, so sorry if I've done something wrong. I know you're not supposed to glorify violence here, but I don't know how to tell the story without it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.